And we're live. We were just saying just before we went live how much the world has shifted since we last spoken.
Absolutely.
Well, apart from the which we'll go to into depth in a minute, man. How you doing, my friend?
I'm hanging in there. How about yourself?
I'm really good, man, and that's what I'm saying. I know it's the cold winter months, which is either brings on creativity or brings on dark thoughts, or which is part of the creativity. But it's my favorite time.
Right.
My favorite time of the year, man. I love winter.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm a big fan of winter too, which is strange because here in Iowa, everyone's terrified of it and like looks at me like I just threatened to kill their dog whenever I say things like that. You like snow? Yes. Yes, I do. There's just something pure about it. Like, yeah, yeah, I think it is a creative thing. There's just in order to properly appreciate winter, you have to not quite be that kind of adult. You can't look at it strictly from a pragmatic point of view. You have to look at it, at least here in Iowa, where there's snow and people can die. You have to kind of look at it from a vain artistic perspective. Like, man, it's stunning. There's just this cold silence, and I agree with you. It either, I mean, it's dark thoughts, creativity, or in my case, both. It's one feeds the other. So. Yeah.
Man, I think on a deeper one, I've always sort of thought this is quite a seamless parallel between the fact of and this is from someone, dude. I live down in South America. I've lived around that equator belt for quite a few years, so I can speak on this in actual, not just talking out my arse sort of thing. But I always feel that the greatest innovations have been brought on by cold weather. You look at the stuff that was done by Northern Europeans. I
Yeah.
wonder if it was done if that was in Africa or in the middle, that nice middle warm belt, it'd ever get done. Because one of the things I've experienced living there, man, when you've got that
Mhm.
nice hot and sunny every day, you don't have a lot of intention to think, oh, I know what I'm going to do, be creative. Now I know the exception to that rule is obviously California, but I mean, just thinking of a general one, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if you can call it an exception. It's California. I take exception to California as a concept, so I don't know. I think that you're absolutely right, and I didn't mean to cut you off there. I meant to make a California joke, and then one didn't percolate fast enough, so we're just left with California. Hey, oh, I guess. Anyway, yeah, no, I wholly agree with you, and there is actually uh, from what I remember, an interesting amount of study around that area. The fact that so much innovation does come from hardship. Like when you're being flooded all the time, you learn to build a dam. When you have all the food you need growing in trees, you don't really see the need for irrigation and things like that. There's just no need for it. We are by nature lazy, and so we don't put our genius to work unless absolutely necessary. And that's beautiful. I mean, honestly, why work harder than you need to? That's the entire point of like modern society, is how do we make things simpler? I mean, if we weren't like that, Apple wouldn't exist. I mean, it's human nature, and I think it's helpful to a point. But now I'm thinking about California as an exception again, and I'm like, there's got to be something, because the Salinas Valley was good, but there's still some broken parts of it. How did Silicon Valley come to exist? Why?
Well,
These are the questions.
from my understanding about why, particularly a lot of the tech industry and all part of that part of California and stuff, was because of the '60s and because of the location. Because obviously they were going down there, they were dropping LSD, consuming many psychedelics, mushrooms and stuff. And apparently, around where actual Google and all those are actually based, the actual area of San Francisco, it was back in the '60s and the late '50s, a very kind of away from people, got a good place to go up and kind of like commune with the universe sort of thing. And then obviously
Interesting.
those people stayed there because of the nice weather and all the rest of it. And look where we are 50 years down the line, man. It's just, I mean, it's just like one big virus on the side of a cake.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I did I read a book about the foundation of Google, and both of them went to the. Are you familiar with the Montessori school?
Mm.
Yeah, they both went to the Montessori school, and that kind of influenced the way that they did everything, and that kind of feeds into the same LSD thing, because the Montessori school is very much of that, micro dosing, and let's just see where the day takes us. There's no curriculum. It's just sort of, do what seems right to you. And that does seem to lead directly to innovation, and a lot more than organized, like everyone has to learn the same things. Which I mentioned because I spent today at work. I work at a library. I spent a lot of time looking at the nonfiction section, and there was an entire selection of education about how we need to remove choice from the classroom. There was a literal book about removing choice. I'm like, that's insane. That's like expecting a fish to be able to ride it. The old Einstein quote of expecting a fish to ride a bike. That's absolutely insane. But there's this entire selection of books of people in America who are absolutely dead set on the fact that testing is terrible, but also so is electives, because you shouldn't have any choice in what you do or why. That's a really strange way to view the world. You're like halfway to the right answer, that we're all individuals and have different interests and are going to excel at different things. And you're like, no. You still need to learn all about this bullshit in Western Europe. Like, there's just no way around that. Like, he just wants to bake cakes. Let him do that. That's fine. Like, what the hell?
Well, I think that was part of and I think the overlap between, it's always fascinated me, this, my friend, because, obviously I'm many thousands of miles away, and we're in a cold little rainy rock over it. And so much of my culture since I've grown up, has just been influenced by, you could argue, a very kind of maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe shorter period in Southern America, down that whole experiment in the 60s. And that short little event, people, experiment with psychedelics, it starts to open people's mind, and then you had this massive explosion. And hey, the good and the bad's come out of that. I mean, there's all
sure, absolutely.
I'm not saying it's all good and it's all, but what I'm trying to say was how much innovation came out of such a short period in one particular place, and how much this has always been my thing. And I think this is maybe where we're I don't know, it maybe leads into what we were saying before we went live, but all my lifetime, ever since that kind of, they almost shut that window down. I mean, we could go into why they did it, why it was all, but suddenly all this was shut down. It was all, I mean, you think about it. I mean, it's a famous analogy about Woodstock. It was like the end of that whole dream, wasn't it? Because they literally, Woodstock burnt at the end of the festival, and then that was it. And then we had. So what I'm trying to say, but from that moment onwards, we've lived under, probably my lifetime and your lifetime, just varying amounts of control that they've never unleashed. That kind of creativity that was there for a period. And obviously now, we're getting to the point, this is what I want to lead us into, because obviously since we last spoken, there's been many changes in your part of the world. But one of the things I think maybe went under the radar was the kind of the shift you saw in how separate states are trying to view like recreational drugs, and the ability to one person's control over their sovereign mind. And I just wonder how much that's, like I'm saying, that door that's been shut from the 60s onwards is just starting to be cracked open. And I'd be fascinated personally where you think that's going to go. And do you think this is all going to, that's what I'm saying, this is the question really. If you listen to the general the paradigm in the media over here, it's, you've elected some fascist Hitler who's just going to basically kill all women.
Orange Hitler, first of all. Orange Hitler.
Yeah, but the narrative, dude, is every day I hear is that he's going to go out and kill everybody who's not white and male, and it's just, you're basically, you've opened up the Third Reich. And what I'm trying to say is it just as bad as that? And hence, do we think we're going to go regress backwards, or do you think what we witnessed in the Trump thing was probably what we saw in the Brexit thing, was people just saying, hey, whatever, we've just putting our middle finger up to the system and say, well, look, if it's a choice of bad choices, we'd rather go with the orange clown than the evil bitch. I don't know.
Right. No, and there's like 9 questions in that one, so it's very hard to pin down where to start. To focus on the easier ones, I do believe like that Trump was the reset button. I don't believe that a large majority of people who voted for him believed that he would. I mean, even if they did believe what he was going to do, they didn't care. They weren't voting the entire last election in America, and again, the Brexit. And I apologize for the American-centric view of this, because I got to be honest with you, ever since Trump's been elected, my crossing over to European, like news has pretty much stopped because I'm terrified that I'm going to die. Um, but here it seems like in this last election we weren't voting for anyone, we were voting against someone. And that's a very strange mindset to go into electing someone. Like, we're not voting for merits, we're voting on like negatives. We were voting for Trump because they weren't Hillary, or voting for Hillary because they weren't Trump. No one was like, I genuinely believe that this person can do a good job. Everyone was just like, I'm terrified of what this other person is capable of. And that's fundamentally horrifying because it indicates a very, very broken system. And I think, in my opinion, the worst party winning, and I certainly think that that's a more than defendable perspective given the petulant child we've seen in the last 2 weeks, at least in my media. It's kind of shown that this, the burn it to the ground and start over again crowd definitely had a heavy sway. Something like 30%, I believe, is the final exit number of people who caucused or were going to vote for Bernie Sanders are voted for Donald Trump. That was strictly out of spite. I have seen one, maybe two, who can legitimately make the move, like intellectually and politically, from where they were to where they ended up with Trump. But most of the time it comes from this it comes from spite, feeling that something was stolen from them. And right or wrong, that's what led to where we are now. And I think that what's going to happen later, and we can delve into that a little bit later with regards to where that could possibly lead globally and everything else, given the fact that like there's going to be superpower shifting. I mean, Merkel having to explain what the Geneva Convention was to the highest governing official in my country of 300 million and more nukes than we should probably be allowed at this point in our history, was a rather disturbing thing to read in my news feed. But back to the drugs, which is where my mind is at all the time anyway. I feel like there was this weird. We had all these people come in the 60s and 70s with the drugs, and they took them, and then they had kids, and they were like, "Oh God, they can't do what I did." We had this sort of it's the same thing Tolstoy does in all of his writing. He lived his life as a soldier and got like gonorrhea all the time, just all the STDs. They had to fucking lather him with mercury. Shouldn't have been able to have any kids at all. Had fucking 13 of the damn ones. Like, was it 14 or 12 of them survived? A crap ton of them survived. A few of them died. He was wealthy-ish. And then he spent his entire life writing about how, oh, no, I have all the answers for you. I did all the drugs. You don't need to do the drugs. I have all the epiphanies. Just trust me. Completely and totally dismissing like the fact that truth isn't universal, and that I could go on a 2-hour rant about how Tolstoy's definition of truth caused him to go insane and die alone in a railroad station. But I think that's it. I think that one generation did all the drugs and was like, holy shit, that was a bad decision. I did a lot of things. Because, when you're doing them, it's fun. When you imagine this thing that you raised in diapers going and having anonymous sex and doing a bunch of drugs and making bad decisions, it terrifies you. And rightfully so. And it's very hard to see something that you know from that early of an age, literally from birth, become this autonomous human being. Like, I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to cope with that. I've got a 15-month-old at home, and I have to remind myself every day that she is going to become a human being and eventually a sexual being, and I can't be that weird sort of amorphous dad thing that's like, I'm afraid of going back to prison, because like that's going to push her away, and it's going to it's going to implore her to do worse than she would if she knew that she had a support network if things go pear-shaped. And I think that that's kind of where we saw all of this coming from. We had the, well, no, that's not entirely fair, because it's the Gen Xers, the baby boomers that are voting for it. This is interesting. I mean, it's a complex problem because it's fucking politics, but that was kind of where I was with the drug part of it. And I think that drugs going forward are eventually going to become, I mean, fascist or socialist. They're going to become either an opiate or open your mind. Like, they're going to be used either to control, or they're going to be used to open. it's going to be a distraction or it's going to be an enticement, and possibly both. And it's inevitable. I don't know how far it's going to go. I think you can make cases for pretty much every drug being legal and just regulating the shit out of it. But then you've got the people worried about big government. But you're like, they're going to do the drugs anyway. But you're like, it's the sex argument all over again. But if you say it's okay and they do it, then it's your fault. Like, life is tricky. Anyway, I answered maybe a quarter of what you actually asked. So, yeah, no, drugs probably going to happen. There's a big shift happening with Trump, and it's fascinating on a conceptual level and horrifying on a personal one.
Well, dude, I think it's. I mean, okay, let's start off with some flag posters. Let's put these in the sand. I mean, let's start with the Trump one. I mean, seeing it's what everybody wants to talk about. Now, what I found fascinating about the Trump one, and I got no dog in the race either way. A, because I'm not American, and B, I'm just a completely impartial, just an outsider. And to be honest, I would never vote. I mean, I'm that kind of person. So I looked at I was saying to a lot of people in my circle, for a long time, that I felt Trump was just going to walk this election. And people were saying, this is all the time when I heard about, 99%, that is no possible. Even the day of the election, they were giving it, no, the chances of him winning today are minimal and all this. But what I saw in Trump was he's the greatest persuader I think the world has ever seen. I think that's his exceptional skill. And he's rewritten the rules, as in, everything that the media throw at him, he's used it as a strength. And this is all that act of persuasion, because he's basically gone to the people and said, and this is what I'm kind of fascinated about, because I think we did see this in Brexit, that we had so much of the establishment, from whatever side it would be, just generally, and it has been all for a long, long time, of just fear, just constant fear from whatever angle it may be. And I don't care if it's right fear or left fear, but it just changes, just whoever it may be. It's the old George Orwell one, we're just told all the time just to constantly fear somebody out there. And I think that we saw it. I mean, I can speak upon like with Brexit. I think it does relate to the Trump one, but we had so much of it over here about, if you dared vote what the collective establishment says, then and they started, as they've done for many years over here. And I think this is where I'll take it a step back. This has gone on for maybe at least 20 years over here. And it's gone from this collective mindset where it's they started pointing the finger at people, and you think, okay, it started off with just calling people racist, sexist, Islamophobic, homophobic. Well, that was back, and in 20 years I've seen it go more and more and more to people are losing their jobs, livelihoods. This is not just people at the bottom, all over the place, just because of what this collective thought goes. But this is what we had in Brexit. We had them telling us one thing about, if anyone dared to vote to leave the EU, the world would collapse the next day, and anybody who dared to even put any opinion out that would have to be racist or sexist or misogynist. And there was all these ists were thrown at this one side. And I think what you saw, and I think you saw this in Trump, was that you saw this whole kind of thing of people just like, I'm just fed up with it. People are just reacting like, do you know what I think we're starting to see? I think I think that either side can play on this either way. You can either say it's Armageddon, and you'll get one side saying, "Oh, see, this is just a proof of how the world has changed." I don't think it is. I think what we're seeing generally is people just going, what's all this? One president, one elective thing. What's all this? I mean, like the EU one. But people were just going, wait a minute. You can't have 27 unelected people making the rules for the whole of the continent. And people they can't see this. But this is what I'm trying to see. I think people are just seeing, like, I think this is the early stages of people just going, this is all, how can we vote for one person every 5 years? What's all this elections and putting a cross on a bit of paper? And I think what you've seen in both sides of this, you start to see this thing of that coming up, because I think, like you said, and this is where I think the deeper question comes to, because this is where I'm a kind of a student of history for as much as I can be, and I think this relates a lot to the 30s. Now, people over here would say, "Oh, of course, because that's we've got some fascists rising in America." I don't think that. I think it's something you spoke upon. And this is one of the dangers I feel, and I think you spoke on when you said about Bernie Sanders fans. One of the things about the 80s, the 30s, sorry, and the 20s in Europe was the idea that people switch from being a socialist to a communist to a fascist all the time. And there's that useful idiots idea that they, these people will flick ideas just because, and you can understand. I understood completely at why, and this is what's scary to me about the democracy and the general thing about what went on in America. It wasn't so much the fact that Trump won; it was more the fact of like, whoa, we had. We, like you said, Bernie Sanders fans, people who naturally supported Sanders, going to Trump because of how corrupt one person in her seeking for power just did. It was disgraceful, man. And you know what gets me about this? Nobody's talking about this stuff. I mean, everyone's over here is going up in arms on a daily basis about Trump and he's doing this. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why isn't anybody just looking at the fact that one person and how corrupt and how they stole the democratic election? Because then you're basically saying you've got one Trump. Yeah, like you said, lesser of two evils, and that's disgraceful, man. And that's what's really scary. That's what's really fearful about America was that basically Trump has arisen because of how corrupt the whole mishmash was, and people are looking to Trump, going, okay, he's going to come in as an outsider and. Hey, that's what he was talking about. I'm going to, swamp, drain the swamp and stuff like that. But man, that's what freaks me out so much was like how corrupt the American system is and how little attention was given to the people in power who were corrupting it. And that's what really, really astounded me was how the media generally just, I mean, I did one night, I tell you what I did. I did one night, I sat and watched CNN and Fox. I just, I literally go from one to the other, and I thought somebody's lying. One of you two is lying, mate, because it's just, and this is what I'm saying. There was no objective. There was no objective media, and this is what I'm saying. We're seeing the foundations of a liberal democracy just falling apart, in my opinion. And that's what I'm not.
I wholly agree with you. I have never felt that I can read one version of a story and walk away with an understanding of it unless it takes place in a foreign country. Like, I'm more than content reading about European news in America because there's no dog in that fight, as you explained yourself. And I have I get my American news from Al Jazeera because they don't care. Like, why would they care? And get my British news from America and get my American news from the British network. Like, that's just, I find that the more distance you can place, and there's still spin. There's always spin. There's always the ones who have and there's always an agenda. There is no non-biased news, just some try to hide it, and there's phrasing issues and things like that. But it's tricky to me because there is no. I struggle all the time with the idea of truth and that idea that there can be something universal to be reported on, the idea that there is somehow that a journalist can do it right and not piss off like half the world just because of the way they're saying something that the other person doesn't want to hear. And I don't know, because I'm too young, whether that's a modern phenomenon or whether that's literally just everything forever. But it seems to me like with basic ability to read between the lines and realize that certain descriptors are bias and have an agenda, and just kind of reading between them, like, this happened here, and realize, oh, okay, this is the part where they're injecting their own spin on it, and then kind of coming across with, okay, so here is the base of what happened, here's the core, and operating on that, as opposed to taking the stuff surrounding it as true. And that's what bothers me the most about media nowadays is the fact that everything is partisan, and instead of trying to fight it, they're relishing it. It's everyone has a different version of the truth, and so you've got these micromanaged communities of groupthink. And I spend all of my time hoping I'm wrong and that the world is going on the right track, because I'm terrified because I view it as being on the wrong track. And I secretly try to convince myself that I'm the one that's wrong, that, totalitarianism and fascism are somehow going to be okay, at least short term. So when I see all these people that just, they don't even bother questioning it, to the point, like, I view what I do as absurd, but they completely and totally close off. And any fact that doesn't fit within a certain narrative is dismissed, not based on who is giving it, but on what is being given. Like, there was a point when Trump was running that Fox News was under fire, and Fox News here is renowned for misleading and being extraordinarily right wing, but they weren't being nice to Trump, and therefore they were wrong. And it's only grown. And at a certain point, I'm wondering what is hyperpartisanship if not what we have now? Because it only seems to be growing worse. We have, I mean, in ours, the current administration in America literally said that they view the press as the enemy, and so I'm left wondering what's the next thing? Are we literally going to believe the government over people looking like I just don't. Uh, and with Brexit, like, and there was something you talked about over there that I wanted to talk to you about, because I didn't quite understand it. Was there a lot of isms being thrown around over the Brexit issue? Like, oh, if you're for Brexit, you're a racist, you're a sexist. Like, that doesn't follow for me. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm in my own little corner of the world. I'm sympathetic to globalism. I believe that when we unite under one front, and I realize that the powers that be in globalism are the problem, but when we're all together globally, that eliminates the culture divide. It eliminates the East versus West. We all kind of assimilate and become known. And I have a sympathy for that, because I believe that is the only chance we're going to survive, is if we all learn that, hey, we're all people, and kind of try to find that middle ground. And globalization, aka the internet, is sort of the means of that. But you brought up an equally valid point with the 21 unelected people basically deciding the fate of innumerable countries, including your own. Like, that is absolutely insane. No, you cannot say you have a free country when your commercial ties are being decided by a cabal, effectively. Like, you have no say, you have no recourse, and instead of addressing those concerns, they threw down the gauntlet and were like, well, if you don't like it, let's just leave. Would you like that? And then you said yes, and they were like, well, fuck, what do I do now? And just shitty reactions to legitimate concerns.
Well, okay. Let me just take this a step back. I mean,
absolutely.
Let's take it from the point of view as was witnessed in the Brexit. Now, let's take. I'll give you a generalisation. Over here, we tend to have there's the Conservatives, which are equal to your Republicans, and then there's the Labour Party, which is equal to your Democrats.
Yes.
Now, generally, all the Labour Party, all of them, basically. I mean, maybe one or two exceptions, but generally, their general thing was, okay, look, you've got to stay to remain, and they fed that narrative, and their whole narrative was one of, and you can go back, and I mean, this is all out there in the public domain. I mean, it's not me sitting there, about how if you did, it was all. The people who wanted to exit were racist and they were Islamophobic because they didn't. It's all this that was thrown to the general. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make, what was fascinating to me after the event was the Labour Party, who basically for years and years and years, and I'm sure it's the same in parts of America, but this whole swathes of Northern England and certain capital places are always just going to be Labour. And then their grandfathers were, their kids were. It's ingrained. It's generational.
Right. It's not a personal opinion. It's a familial.
Always going to be red cities. They're always going to be red counties. There always has been for all my life and forever. But what happened was the Labour Party generally got whole swathes of the Northern England. And after the election, what was fascinating was that when they realised that they did all the turning up, that the people that turned their back and said we want to exit, to Brexit, were all the people up north, who were all the general Labour voters who had been told by their party that basically, if you're voting for them, you're racist and ever. And what it really was this is one of the fascinating things, and I think one of it is why it's this whole world we live in. It's so easy to chuck out labels, because this whole label of chucking out, you're this, you're that, you're there, and the other. And I've always thought, every time I've always heard this, I thought it's easy, and it came across this very clearly in the Brexit. You had people who were, let's be right, class, very middle classy, sitting in their haughty-taughty big, middle class areas of town, and saying, "Oh, well, look at those people that if you look at them all, they're all racist and that." But I've always said this, and this is, to me, is a proven truth. The people who live jaw to jaw, face to face, sinew to sinew, sharing the same, are the people who are the working class, and they're all the people who voted for Brexit. And that was like, oh, so this is black people voting for Brexit. This is people who come over from Europe voting for Brexit. And what they couldn't understand was, because this is the whole point, there was two big arguments in the Brexit that's got basically washed under this whole, basically, just like, well, of course you have to do it. It's all fear, Project Fear as it was known, and Project Isms, and they're throwing everything at everybody. But what they didn't realise, what they saw was the people who suffered the most were the working class, the people whose jobs are being taken because corporations are gone hand in hand with the government. They love all this European stuff. Oh, they love it. They get cheap labour. And all that happens is it suppresses the wages of the people who are living in these cities up, and all around the UK. Their wages get suppressed. They can't find work because cheap labour is being bought underneath them. Then they're pushed into their housing, and then the housing is being stolen. The public services are going to rack and ruin because everybody's just flying over to the United Kingdom and getting free NHS. And what this was never spoken about. This is the only reason I mentioned this was never spoken upon. And when you saw that afterwards, it was like, this is what we're going through in this country at the moment. Like, oh. This is why the Labour Party, and this is again reflecting to this, because now the Labour Party and the left have collapsed. And you know what? This is what's so weird about this. And I've always sort of said that if you'd spoken to me in my 20s, everybody would have said to me, "You're some extreme left guy, man. What are you about?" But and now I was looking after look at Facebook last 2 weeks, and you got people who are supposedly the rock and roll rebels, and they're all talking about how great the CIA are, and I'm like, what's happened to our world, man? Has the world been pushed so far down a collective mindset that even just to say some of these things now, you're kind of seen as some right-wing fascist? And it's like, even to say, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a working class guy and my wages have been suppressed, that's now deemed as you're some right-wing. And it's like, whoa, what's gone on? The pendulum has so far swung. And this is what scares me, because once any pendulum swings, as what you're going to see in Europe. What happened in Brexit is just going to be the first thing. You're going to see country after country after country, especially Germany. She said 2 million. She said 2 million people came in, and they've been all sorts of problems, and she's going to pay for that. She's going to pay for that. And this is what you're going to see over and over again, because the people at the top didn't listen, became arrogant, and told everybody what to do down below, and then outsiders come in like Trump and like what we have with Brexit, like Farage, and it shocks the establishment. But this is going to happen over and over again, because we've had too many years, as I've seen it, this comfortable elite metropolitans sitting down there and just basically loving it. I mean, guess what I'm saying? The people who lived in comfortable middle class, comfortable areas, they don't care. They don't see black people. They don't see the immigration problems. That's all shoved into cities. They like it. They like it because they get cheap nannies, and they that's like now. It's like over here. They're called the Ramonas, and their biggest complaint is like, oh well, I'm going to have to get a visa to travel to Europe. And I'm like, well, Sorry, snowflake. What, you have to get a visa and sign a bit of paper to go to Europe, so you can go to south of France and get your fresh yogurt and cheese. But oh, all right, for that then we won't do that, and we'll make all the working class suffer and their wages and all that, and we'll just bring the system down just so you can go to Europe at any time you like. It's so that's how clear it is over here. It's ridiculous.
That is really so. It's considered a right-wing concern that wages are low in Europe. That's what I took away from the wages being suppressed, as you put it. Is that considered a more conservative view, that rather than the liberal one, which is not?
No. Sorry, my point I'm trying to make is none of this was spoken upon. This is what you saw in the Brexit.
Oh no! Obviously, you saw
I'm saying I don't think. I think that's what I'm saying. I think if you broke it, like all things, I mean, I'm speaking broad stroke. I think you went to certain parts, it would be like very much about the sovereignty. Like no.
Sure.
Other parts it was about the wages. Other parts it was just like, well, our whole culture's been changed in a period of 5 5 years by forced immigration, because this is what happens. It's all just forced and channeled by the central government, and they shove it up to another part of the country. So I don't think it's a right wing or a left wing thing that anybody's playing into it. That was what really got me about Brexit. Nobody, even I think the people in pro Brexit, oh, they spouted this and they did that, but I don't think anybody over it was a bit like you were speaking upon with Trump. I think people who are pro Brexit wouldn't be particularly pro UKIP or pro Farage or pro some sort of nationalistic party. This is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to play. This is what's so easy in the world. It's just everything's just painted on broad strokes, when actually there's a lot of minute details and a lot of actual very grey details that this gets lost in this wide brushstroke of left, right, and it's like, well, wait a minute, we're not just all
people,
one sort.
Yeah. There are layers to the world, and that's becoming unacceptable. And speaking to your concern about the isms, like there's an inherent litmus test whenever we talk to someone now, where if they don't if they don't answer one question correctly, we immediately assume they're this, that, or the other thing, and we dismiss them, as opposed to saying, okay, well, how did you get to this point? And don't get me wrong, there are people you can cast out because they're literally just regurgitating what they're being fed. But to cast that as a rule and to say that anyone who votes left or right on a certain issue, that happens to mean a lot to them, and that therefore means that they are unapproachable or immoral or don't have a backbone, it's disingenuous and dangerous, which is what this is showing now, because the pendulum is violently swinging as opposed to shifting to the other side. So as opposed to saying, hey, how about we address these minute concerns, scalpel as opposed to hammer. No, we're going to go full hammer, and we're going to go pre-World War II, and no one's going to have health insurance, and we're all going to be anemic, and civil wars and global conflict might be smaller now, which is no less terrifying given the greater grade of weapon that we have at our disposal. And that's not to be fear-mongering. It to me, at the very least, it's not meant to be fear-mongering. It's just when you break up the forced unity that was the EU, you're going back to, from my understanding, the reason Europe has been as peaceful as it has, because we're basically, America is the military force of the entire world. We have military bases all over everything, and so no one can sit there and go pussyfooting around where they don't belong. And it's there's a lot of very strange maneuverings that exist when everyone is out for themselves as opposed to trying to work towards the whole. There's a lot more backbiting, and I guess that's my greatest concern with Brexit. And I understand the reason for it. My concern is the regression to nationalistic tit for tat, the boundary disputes, they have this, I need that. Russia and Crimea, effectively, because Russia has basically spent 70 years ostracizing themselves ideologically and then politically. Well, it's actually the same thing. And I guess I understand why these things need to be done, because obviously no one was listening. We were in an age of acquiescence where we just sort of acknowledged that, hey, we sold our ability to become rich so that we could have a mild comfort. Our best would be middle class. We acknowledged this, and we tacitly accepted it after World War II, and that was kind of okay, we won't have the big revolution that we were all going to have originally. And then they just kept on taking and plugging and taking away until there was no middle class, and now we're pissed off. And I understand that, but I'm also terrified of it, because no one who was alive during World War I or just before we started recruiting for World War II is alive anymore. So I see people missing large swaths of history and realizing that going things alone and focusing on oneself, it leads to strange things. But then again, there's the internet. I don't know, we're regressing, but we have different tools this time, and so I'm ultimately I'm curious and terrified, and I feel like that's pretty much just called being alive. So I'm not really sure what I'm going on about at this point. Uh,
Well, I think what you're talking about, and I think if you to really broaden this up, and I think this is what we're seeing is this general swathe or duality between the battle, which for want a really bad word, between individualism and collectivism. And one of the things about technology, it just enhances individualism. It does say to someone,
yeah.
hey, and I think what the thing about this is, I personally think with the synergy between technology and that understanding of anybody can the individual, but the technology connects. See, the difference is not, and I do contemplate this a lot, my friend. I mean, I sit I could walk out of my house, look out at the river, and see Trident going past every Monday, and I think that's a billion-pound nuclear weapon flying, literally in the sea past my house, and it's going to go off, and its ability to be shot. I understand. I grew up with. This is one of the things that probably my age, and particularly in Europe, man, I grew up with all that. I remember as a kid, I was riding the flight path. If it was all going to kick off, I remember every day going to bed as a kid thinking it's going to, the nuclear war is going to happen. That was a daily reality to me. But one of the things I think, what I'm trying to say with the connection between what we're seeing with like I say, with technology, and it's had that little connection. What I don't know. I'll have to hear your thoughts on this, but I just personally don't think there's any way that any government will ever be able to get the amount of men in general onto a battlefield to go and do the damage to other human beings. I think those days are gone. I think there's always sort of the big powerful weapons, and then could they drop them?
Yeah.
But then I think when you get into that, you get into another really philosophical or again a historical one, and thinking, okay, we've had these weapons since the 60s and since the 40s. Mankind has wrestled with this for a long time. Oppenheimer talked about it. We've wrestled this, but we've got here. I mean, this is one of those things that goes back to the thing, this argument. We could look at it and go, it's all doom. We could look at it and go, okay, the rocket, we don't know the future, but at least we know it. We've got here, and that's the thing about humanity. We've got here so far. And I just think the more we do progress, all that happens is all the barriers are dissolved and broken down. And human beings, that's what I'm saying, man. We're having conversations like this, which means, okay, I've got no hatred for for you. And then someone talked to someone in Africa, who talked to someone in Slovakia, and humans start to connect. And it's that globalism without being a centralized globalism. Do you know what I mean? Where humanity,
right? Yeah, no, absolutely.
Whereas the other way of looking at it, it's basically we're just waking up and understanding that we are just literally we're just meat machines on a rock, and we are just all one experience, and that's going to be an interesting one, which I think technology, like all these things, destructive things happen that nobody sees. And I think all the arguments that everybody talks about politics and we could all go to war and all that, and then I think, well, okay, all the time everybody's sitting there arguing about this firecracker and that firecracker. Some guy in Silicon Valley, some guy in China, some guy in wherever in the world is sitting inventing an app that's going to change everything. Some guy's got an idea that's going to bring out a platform that's going to, cure the cancer. These are the things that are actually going on, and it's only just a case of nobody's talking about it, but it's always that constant march of innovation and people connecting. And this is what I'm saying. I think there's a general. Hey, this is when we get to a really good question. I think generally, mankind generally is a positive being and wants to evolve. We're not a destructive animal. I think that's because you know what I mean. That's why I think a lot of the wars have always been caused by a few people who've been given all the power rather than. It's never been 2 million on 2 million on a battlefield like it was back in Greece, has it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. That I want to believe. I'm reading my Dostoevsky here. I want to believe that we as human beings are capable of unimaginable beauty and soul-crushing horror. We are a duality. We in the same moment can go from one to the other. But I do believe that we are, in the correct circumstances, relentlessly selfish. And I believe that desperation is one of those triggers. And I believe right now we are in a desperation. And that is what worries me with regards to swinging too far to the pendulum. Like, I get that we want to shake things up. My concern is that we've gone too far too quickly without realizing just what we've gone about accomplishing. And when and if we were just talking, oh, we're just going to go into a land war and a couple million people will die, and that sounds crass and it sounds terrible, but we would survive. But at this point, we have reached this postmodern era where the planet's dying and we've got nukes so we can destroy everything. All it takes is one person stepping out of line and the entire world is not done. We'd survive in caves and stuff for at least 100 years or so, most likely, in dozens, if not hundreds of thousands. But I don't know. I have a very hard time being positive about where we're at now. I see it, but I see us fighting the wrong things. We are fighting the system, but we're fighting it with scorched earth. And again, it's the hammer versus the scalpel thing. And like, if we were just like, oh, look, we're going to go ahead and fight these people individually, like, casting out a member of parliament who is clearly fucking things up and kind of going at it small to big, but we're not. We're going big and then to small, which is fucking terrifying, because we've got all these third parties, fourth, fifth parties going, oh, we're going to go ahead and run for prime minister, president, and this and the other thing. And that's not how things should work. You power overnight. You have to kind of build towards it and build an understanding. And it's this all or nothing mindset that has me so concerned. And it feeds into partisanship, and it feeds into, the selfishness. And I've seen a lot of very ugly things at least on the American front with your Brexit. I don't think there was as much. I don't believe that Brexit was backed by whatever your version of the white power movement is, but Trump was. And there's a lot of that being fed into. And the idea that we're going back to what Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft were writing, these like, I was born this, and therefore I have a natural hatred towards this person because they are inferior because of where they came from. That as a natural and right way of thinking is terrifying to me, because I had lied to myself so much in my early 20s that we were post-race, that we were beyond this, and it turns out no, they were just being bullied into being quiet. And I don't see. I believe human beings can be good, but I believe that good is predicated on a number of factors, and every person has different triggers that will remove them from being willing to engage for the greater good. And with the dawn of the internet, we have this ability to become a fog. We have the trolls. We have the troglodytes on the internet that are basically just there for a reaction, there to cause harm to people they don't understand. They're in it, as they put it, for the lulz. And that is terrifying to me, because it alienates humanity. They feel themselves as part of a game as opposed to part of a collective. And we have a lot of that to work out, and I'm not sure we're coming on the right side of things.
No, but I do completely concur with that. But I think this is I don't know. I often, this is my reflection on America generally, and again, I can only speak this in wide terms. But you're a very young culture, and
yes, absolutely.
I do think you're, you literally, you can almost see the reflection of maybe what it was like over here in the 17th century. It was the same sort of idea. And when Adam Smith sat and wrote, all about capitalism and that whole concept, that was exactly the same point. We had very super rich people made their money from the plantations.
Oh yeah,
and the same thing.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing in America now is just basically which is what you are. You're a superpower. You've got all that, like we did the empire, and you've got it at a time when you've got the ultimate. Bizarre point of history, put it that way. I mean, you've got the
absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? So you've been given Americans have been given the crown at a very strange part of history. But I think just generally, I think this is one of the things that that happens is, and that's what I'm saying. I think from everywhere I've been around the world, yeah, there's always one tribe doesn't have it against another tribe. And hey, do you know what? I mean, and again, I never want to broad stroke this because I think to say to someone like you've got to love all humanity and you've got to get along with each other like a kumbaya thing. Well, I give examples. I knew somebody, a perfect example. Um, when I coached a football team, I had a kid over from Africa, and he'd seen his mother and his father killed by another tribe, in part of that whole Congo thing. And
Yeah.
he'd been put into a street into Leeds, and then the street behind him, they'd also, because they were just seen as black refugees, they stuck a whole lot of the tribe lot who killed him. So every day he had to get out of his house and walk past the members of the tribe who killed his mother, and all that. Now you can't tell that kid to suddenly go kumbaya, and we're all. Yes, we do. I'd love to all to be in the world, but what I'm trying to say is, yes, there's always that kind of thing. But I think generally, there's always that tribal, where one wants to do the other. But I just think, like I say, I think that the general progression of what we're seeing is just integration, and I think I think that is a positive thing because I mean. And I think what you're speaking upon, America, and this is what you see when like I said about your culture, because you're very much in that young phase, and you're literally. I look at America, you're like literally like 15-year-old kids in the playground, and it's like, who's got the biggest car, who's got the biggest house, and right now you've got the tools and that, but this will all. Honestly, dude, I mean, I often think about it. I think, well, go back to what it would have been like in the 50s and the 60s. People would have said exactly the same. They would have think, well, Christ, we got what's going on in Cuba. We've got the Bay of Pigs. We've got communism taking over country after country. They would have had all the doom ideas, let alone all what we started.
No, absolutely.
So, what I'm trying to say is we do get over that, and I think one of the things is that, as much as, like you're saying, I mean, I'm sure there's all that, people who, I'm sure there's whole culture, parts of America who don't like person for the color of their skin, but how many more people aren't compared to what it was like 30, 40 years ago? And this is what
absolutely.
I mean. It's diluting smaller and smaller and smaller, but we live in a world where, like you said, because we live in that, culture where you're trolls and it's all very, who can shout the loudest. These people have all the voice. So then you tend to think they shape the narrative when they don't shape the narrative. They're just the outliers and the people with the loudest voices, when the rest of us are all getting along, paying our bills, going along to our, sports meeting.
Right.
We're all generally getting on as a people, and far more than. And I again, if me at 20 and me now in my mid 40s, we're far more progressed in the way that there's no way that that anyone would even dare to be like, well, just as my parents were in the 70s, going around slapping women on the backside and calling people from Asia all this names, and just general, we have shifted completely, and we're not there yet at all. But I just think the general progression is, and I think one of the fears of this whole, where we live in the paradigm and the media and everything, is that they always want to focus on the extremes and make out that's what it is. And
right.
Whereas in reality, we all have to get on the bus tomorrow morning, pay our bills, go to the supermarket, have a coffee with somebody. That's the reality, and generally, that's what you see when it's the old Bill Hicks joke. I mean, they talk about doom, fear, war, pestilence, violence, and you look out your window and the birds are singing, and it's like, wait, that's real life, because that's what
Yeah. No. I guess my problem with them shutting on us and them not shaping the narrative is the fact that with the 24-hour news cycle they do, every moment has to be filled with news that is also entertaining. And at least here, the entertainment is rage. That is what we do. We feed these aged people who don't necessarily understand the internet, don't understand the culture that's evolved around them, or do and are alienated and terrified by it, and we feed them that it's wrong. We feed them to be angry, and that makes them angry, and that makes them act angry, and they say angry things, and they do terrible things. Back in 2000, I want to say, we'll say 12 for the sake of simplicity. There was a debate going on between Obama and Romney, and it was it might have been McCain, but we're going to say it's Romney. And they were a church, the one they went to when I was a kid, And there was this old man sitting there. Basically, every time Obama opened his mouth, he sat there and called him a liar. I mean, this is a church, with little kids running around being these glorious little assholes, just wonderful, just obnoxious little kids. And he's just sitting there being angry at this TV. And eventually, one little boy running by sees him sitting there cursing at the TV, and he just turns to this old man and goes, "Shut up, he's awesome." And the look of "I'm going to beat the shit out of this little boy" was something I will never forget. This 70-year-old man, because of something a 5-year-old said about politics. I mean, the kid doesn't have any opinions. He's literally spouting what his parents said. He looked like he wanted to strike him down. And that's not healthy. Nothing a kid says should make you want to hit them other than maybe why. Because, I mean, it was insane. And to see that is what the 24-hour news cycle is breeding worries me, because I want to agree with you and believe that the outliers aren't shaping the narrative, but the outliers sell eye contact. You're watching the screen when you're being emotionally manipulated. You don't look away when you're sad. I mean, the liberal news outlets are doing it with Trump. Well, everyone's doing it with Trump because Trump is a spectacle. But like, even if they didn't, if a traditional conservative had won, MSNBC and CNN would be using it as a means of getting fear, angst, and just like, look at this asshole, and vice versa for the right, as they had been for 8 years with Obama. Like, it's just what we feed each other in creating this hyperpartisan buggery that's ultimately meaningless. And just kill all the news channels. Just give them an hour every day where they have to boil everything down, and just no more 24-hour news. I feel like that's probably, in order to feel like we are safe as a group, I feel like you really have to cut down on the idea of news as entertainment. And that's the closest I'll get to believing that the media is garbage. It's that the media has too much time to fill, and they don't have scruples about what they fill it with. Whereas if we limited what time was available to them, they might be a little more scrupulous and attentive, as opposed to using Twitter as a means of verifying primary sources.
Yep, indeed, my friend. And this is the worry about this, and I've said this all my lifetime. And it's all the time while they got us dancing to whatever firecracker they want to get us, on, whether it's biting dogs or whatever it may be. All the time, laws are being passed. Another one goes through, and just more and more of our rights have just been taken and taken and taken. And all we're bothered about is whatever the latest plate full of entertainment, and that is worrying, because as I'm saying, this is what you see more and more in reflection. This is what scares me. Let's put this onto the table. I mean, like I said, I've got no dog in the fight, but it doesn't serve anybody any good to make out that, to paint, Trump as this Nazi German Hitler, because he's not. And this is the point. If we start to call people like him things that they're not, then this is what happens. You really do just basically lose the power of words, and you lose what effective, and and suddenly it's like, well, wait. And it's all very dangerous to me, and that's what I think. I'm saying about the media, that they do this because of that very reason. But in the meantime, while that's going on, I think the only way we can push back against that is, as I said before, it's just don't. It's difficult, and I think this is one of the things that we're learning through this the whole debate in your part of the world and my part of the world. And hey, it's just, maybe it's just like, go back to what you said earlier on. Humans are intrinsically lazy, and we've got to start to realize we can't be lazy. You can't just switch on a news channel and expect to be brain fed that garbage. You've got to go out and do some research yourself. Same with history, same with everything. You've got to start, and that's one of the things that human beings don't want to hear. They don't want to hear the fact they've got to start using that brain and exercising. They just want to go down, get their half an hour fix, and told what narrative to go out and pump.
Mm-hmm. I suppose the greater question to that, I suppose I'll call it an ultimatum, is how do you convince a group of people that have to work 40 to 80 hours a week that they need to take more time out of their day to become informed, as opposed to just being directed towards something, being vindictive, and told that that thing is to blame for the fact that they don't get to see their kids, they don't get to be able to afford to go to vacation outside of their state or province or whatever. Like, how do you connect with those people whose way of thinking is so and even just beyond convincing them that it's wrong, that convince them that it's wrong to begin with, that it's not normal to have to work 80 hours a week, that it's not just sort of like the I'm an American and or I am this hyper motivated individual. Having 2 or 3 jobs in this country right now is normal. Like that is just, oh yeah, no, everyone's got like two. I'm assuming it's the same over there because there's just no full-time work. Because let's be honest, power is the same everywhere. Everyone assimilates and everyone does what they have to do, but the powers that be just suck everything up. And there's no power in having to give people benefits and retire savings, whatever the hell that one's called. My mind just blanked on that one. I just I don't know how to convince people that you have to get them to step back emotionally first. And I don't know how to do that because it's not fair to call Trump a Nazi. There are because it's the genre thing. Like it doesn't help anyone to pin it in a genre. It doesn't do any good to call a book fiction or science fiction or fantasy or mystery. It doesn't do any good. It helps you to feed your own biases. Like, oh, I'll probably like this, but it doesn't do any good in terms of like exposure to ideas. Uh, I don't know how to convince anyone that that's worth their time. And I'm not suggesting that you have any better chance of it than I do. It's just like that I think is one of the greatest problems that we have to overcome. We have to start a generation new, like possibly my daughter's generation, possibly the one just before hers, where I'm seeing now at the library with my 12 to 14-year-olds, people who are connected to the internet and realize that they have all of this available to them and know how to find it. If they have that from the time they're born, maybe then if they're properly motivated, if we have, I don't know, a class, their parents getting involved, saying, okay, here's how you find things, like the right words. But even then, the search engines themselves are inherently biased towards whatever. I don't know. I'm talking myself in circles. There's no great answer to this, and it's fucking killing me.
No, I think the bottom line of this is, and this again, and I think this is again. There's no right answer. If I had the answer to this, I would tell you, but I don't think
Oh, absolutely! Please, God, I need to sleep tonight.
I think the point that being though is that we have again, and I can only saying I personally reflect on the exponential speed that we have gone in the last 20 years as humanity, and I think it's just we can't cope with it. I mean, at the moment, this is what I'm saying,
Yep.
and that's the point. That's what news programs. That's what they're all. Everybody's just trying to, concentrate what they can gather into a piece of, nice little, sugary little sweet that someone can have and go, there you go, there's your bit of the news and stuff like that. And this is one of the things that I don't know if we ever can go back. I don't know if we ever can go back to just seeing, okay, it was like that. That's what I was trying to explore earlier on. I think maybe the genie's out the bottle. But
Absolutely.
But secondly, and I think the way to change this isn't, and again, like anything in life, and this is again, I think hand in hand with what I'm saying with technology, because technology, for all it's given us, it's made certain things easier to do. For instance, how my thought, how much I'm fascinated by cryptocurrency and all that. And again, that's another one. See, these are the disruptions. I mean, everybody goes on about Bitcoin being about money. Well, it's not. The whole concept behind Bitcoin was take the money out of the system, and they can't send people to war. It's a peaceful idea, and this is how you change things, because it needs basically people to come up with ideas, then start to implement them, and it's like anything else in nature. Then the herd eventually will catch on. And and you were saying, well, how do you convince someone? Okay, maybe you're not doing. I've spent maybe too many hours in my life trying to have very long conversations with people, and you can't do, because it's not from my place to either change their mind, or they will always come up with exactly the right answers. I've got bills to pay. Hey, I get all that, but equally, so I look at it and think, as much as I hear that, and I look on the other side and think, I mean, I was just reading the last 2 weeks. The amount of entrepreneurs in Great Britain has exploded, and these kids, they're not wanting to. They're none of this. Let's put a suit on, what 9 to 5 rubbish. They're just in their bedrooms working when they want to do. Going, they're deciding their own paths and completely. And this is what you're starting to see. This is what I was trying to say earlier on. This isn't spoken upon. This is all disruptive stuff. Just like when the printing press came out, nobody talked about it, and then it changed everything. And this is what I think the people who are really outsiders. And this is what I'm saying. This is why me and you, as writers and creatives, this is what we can start to see. I see this going on. I see this particularly. You mean, man, you bring it to the fact that your daughter's age or anyone under the age of 10, their world is going to be completely different. They won't. They will look at us and they will think, "What, granddad worked in an office and sat and watched his news." That's what we've always got to remember. We've got to remember that we mustn't get old before our time, because we can see it and look at everything and think, well, couldn't the same have been said about TV? Wasn't the same said about when I grew up? When I was growing up listening to Iron Maiden and Dio and stuff like that, I was told I was going to hell, and it was, hey, I've heard all this crap before, and I generally think the way that things change is, ironically, it's always through connection, and the connection that is happening through technology. And once you give people the power to not only connect with people to all around the world, but have the power to build things and fulfill their own potential, then that's how you change things. Just like the internet changed things. We're not all just sitting listening to 5 channels of TV. This is how I think things are going to change. Will it happen or not? I don't know, but I'm very I'm very optimistic, because all I know is now that 10 years ago, when I'll give you a perfect example. When I lived in Argentina in turn of the millennium, it went from last millennium, there was 5% internet penetration in Argentina. Now it's plus 90%, and you think that's happened in just that short period of time. Kids in Africa have all got smartphones, man. This is the unseen stuff that nobody's speaking about, that I do think these are the things that are going to change the world. Do I know the answer? No. But do I think these are steps in the right direction? Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I'm the more I'm thinking about this, because I do feel like we're treading similar ground. I feel like the key divide here is the fact that you are more optimistic than I am. I am inherently a pessimist. I would disguise that emotionally by saying realist, but that's bullshit. That's another way of saying I'm just a sad asshole. Whereas you're being much more like, yeah, no, we have this. We have to trust in the fact that these kids, these entrepreneurs that you're talking about, are going to grab life by the balls and say, no, we're going this way. Fuck you. And I find that very, very assuring. Like that idea of that, if I could wrap my cold, broken heart around that, I would sleep smiling every single night, because I'd be like, it's just a rough patch. We'll get there. And honestly, part of the world will. My concern is that I won't be a part of it, or that my kid won't be a part of it, or that those that I love won't be a part of it. That's what worries me. So I suppose that my concern isn't so much that you're wrong; it's that that it won't get enough. It will lead to some sort of weird segregation is the wrong word, because it wouldn't be. Well, it is self-segregating in the fact that it's have and have-nots, but it's. God, that's tricky. It's a tiered society at that point. Like there is this group of people that have that had the idea, that got it. It's like the Bitcoin millionaires. They were the ones that got on the idea early, and then it's pretty much been on lockdown. Like no one is going to be able to become a nouveau millionaire off of. I mean, I say cryptocurrency, certainly not Bitcoin, probably cryptocurrency as a concept. There may be some argument for Ethereum, but like, unless there's a new revolutionary way of doing things, like it's not going to happen again. And my concern is that we're basically just building smaller and smaller tiers that are kind of offsetting these branches and creating cul-de-sacs of culture. And certainly they're worth inviting. I just feel like they may be dividing humanity as opposed to uniting it. And that's a scope issue. And I think that with the internet, you can rightfully say that, yes, no, it'll bring us together, because ultimately, you watch someone like you watching this 20 years from now, you look at the sad motherfucker being all like, but I don't want my dad, like that's going to affect you emotionally. You see the faces, you're going to be like, I don't want this person to suffer. And especially if we move beyond like the faceless text and we go on to where everyone's talking in video, or at the very least has a picture next to their name, or I don't know, some sort of, I guess, comparative emotional tie, somewhere we can see them as people as opposed to words on a screen that we need to react vitriolically towards. That would help. I apologize. My mind is racing. I have a very hard time keeping up with it as of late. I'm very concerned about the changes in society leading not to all of us going up, but some of them. And because that's what we saw with Bitcoin. It might change still. It's still growing. It's still going in a different direction, but there's a large section of it that are no mine. They don't want it for everyone. They want it for themselves. They're no, keep the block small, keep everything like no, it's not for them, it's for us, because they want to preserve their own value. And I'm worried that that's just going to be a series of circuitous events that lead to that. And I don't expect any like coherent response to that other than you'll see, asshole. But I don't know. I worry a lot about that because, and that's I'm working on a book that kind of is trying to figure out where that divide is going to come, whether it's going to be binary, whether it's going to be the super rich and the poor, or whether it's going to be this like multitude, like black hats, gray hats, white hats, and then the corporate structure that exists outside of it. And then there's just these multi-tiers. Some of them are 4-dimensional, some of them are 2, and there's no, how are we going to communicate in that sort of culture where everyone's having this new great idea and it changes the way we communicate or function in such a way that the old way can't function inside of that new paradigm? I've talked myself into a corner.
No. I personally think this is. I mean, man, there's nothing more enjoyable for me to. I love to read it. I love to read utopia stories. I love to read all of them. I love to read, right back. I love to read them all back to the Greek times. Everybody's painting their little utopia. Utopia. I don't believe. I think utopias are just that. They're lovely little pieces of writing.
Oh yeah, no, they're fairy tales.
But what I'm thinking is, hey man, and anybody knows me kind of just a little bit knows I'm very doomy. I mean, I'm not Mr. Cheerful, pat ourselves on the back, aren't we great?
Because you're pragmatic.
The way I look at it, and this is one of the things I've always seen, that I've been fortunate to been to many parts of the world, and I've always sort of thought that people are people. They do get on, and I think, and this is the thing is, and I think one of the big problems that we're going through at the moment, and I think it is just because of, like, we go back to what we were saying earlier on, we're just kids with these new toys that we think it's all fascinating at the moment. We are like the colonialists. We've got on ships and we're like, oh look, listen, I'm a little country that's got bananas, and oh look, I've found this new plant, and we're very much like that with our technology at the moment.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, I think one of the things that we're going to I don't know, maybe it's one of the things that if you did, like you said, you used the analogy that in 50 years' time or 20 years' time or 100 years' time, whatever, that one of the mindset changes we're going to have to be is kind of like, just let's ease up on having to know about everything about everybody. We don't need to know about them. It's almost like leave me alone stuff. I personally do. This is this is where I'm a very complex person. I'm someone who's loved. I've immensely, some of the greatest moments in my life have, benefited from being able to just get on a plane and travel to South America and live in Argentina and all over, and hey, absolutely. But all the time I did it, I'm not just suddenly doing that. I've always thought this is far too easy. This is far too cheap. Far too easy, far too cheap. I've always been, when people say to me now, like, I say to them, no, don't go there. No, don't. Unless you really want to go down to Argentina, don't go down there, because you're not adding to anything. You're causing problems in every sense, environmentally and everything like that. And this is one of the things, again, it ties into what I say about where the things that technology are going to go. We're going to see VR rights, and that, again, hopefully will do us all back, because instead of us getting on planes or like we all do, we can actually go. exactly, and experience things and gain some empathy and gain some things. And that's what I'm just sort of saying. I think one of the mindsets we're going to have to really get through is that we've lived in a very fortunate, weird perspective. And I'm not saying we should go backwards because I'm not that, but I think the mindset's got to change where we've all got to go, look, like for instance, America's got us to understand it's not the policeman of the world. We've all got to understand
What? But no, I need to kill
we've all got
brown
to
people.
exactly we've all got to realize that you know everybody should just leave each other alone. This is one of the things about everything, and I think this is why I'm generally optimistic because I think people do live by that, and this is one of the things that when you start to live in other parts of the world, you realize, like, oh man, there's been some vicious stuff getting on, but human beings will within a generation get over it, and they'll be moving on, and it's always the problems I've always found, and I tell it again, I lived all the way down in South America. The problems wasn't caused by you know Village A and Village B not getting on. It was the IMF. It was the World Bank. It was these
Hmm.
outside forces wanting to impose their things to basically suck resources out so their people can have cheap food. And
Yeah,
this is the mindset that's going to change it. Like, if you want to have food, grow your own food. Don't expect to have like today. I went down to the supermarket today, and I couldn't grow. There was no like locally grown products, but I could get a kiwi
really.
fruit. And I could get a bag of kiwi fruit for like under £2, which is like $3. And it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. In the middle of winter, I'm getting kiwi fruit, and there's probably people. Well, I was actually ironically reading that there's people in the some of the Pacific Islands. They're having diabetes going through the roof because they're importing all their crap and they're exporting all their shit to us. We get free kiwis. We import them crappy sugary foods. That's all got to
Right.
change. And that's from the
Absolutely.
mindset of not from people above, but we've all got to do that. Because this is the thing, we
Yeah.
can all contribute in that. You don't have to partake in it. It's a bit like when I grew up as a kid. If you didn't believe in, you didn't want to support apartheid, don't buy South African products. If you don't want these things, then we've all got as humans got to realize, well, maybe I can't have my kiwi fruit in February. Maybe I've got to do a bit of research into my news. Maybe I've got to spend a bit more time with my kids. Maybe I've just got to, up my game as a human being. And like you were saying, human beings are inherently lazy, and that's the problem. Human beings don't like that, and that's the worry that the people who are in control, they play into that they know about humanity, and that's why they give
Hmm.
them soft, cheap answers, and they just go, well, hey, you can have everything for cheap and free. And that's a mindset of the individual we've got to go through, whether you're 65 or whether you're 6 years old. Or everybody's got to go through that, and that's just the difficult thing. And I know many people in my life, man, who when even they know that, they go, yeah, and they won't do anything about it. And they will go and buy McDonald's and they won't do anything about it. And they just, just march themselves to an early grave and hey, that's a human trait as well. That whole,
Hmm.
hey, fuck it, the world's all going to hand in a hell cart. Fuck it, I'm going to go and do what I want to do. And that's, to me, it's not about being a positive or negative mindset. That's just a thing about, man, you've got to be some sort of optimism. If not, why are we all having kids? What's the point of it going on? I mean, this is
I
what I'm saying.
mean,
Like, dude,
yeah.
I know the doom one, man, but you've got a child and a family, man. That's the
Hmm.
point. You wouldn't have
Yeah.
brought a
Well,
child,
right. Absolutely.
and you would hope that you only gain. The only thing you can hopefully do is make your daughter's life and your children's life a better life than you had, and hopefully the
Hmm.
world a better place than they did. And isn't that the same for every generation?
I mean, I would say that except for what we're dealing with now, which is climate change denying, at least in my part of the world. I hope Britain's a little more on board with it. I'm sorry, I don't follow your environmental news. I'm a very selfish person. Uh, um, but we're rife full of denialism and all we're worshiping a dollar, not at the altar of ourselves. It's not even selfish at this point. It's literally worshiping something that doesn't exist. We believe that something that we made up is more powerful than ourselves,
Mm.
and that's terrifying to me because I do believe that it started off as us wanting to build better lives for us and our children and our grandchildren, etc. But it's beyond. It's evolved into a cult, and that's stupid. First of all, like that's just stupid. Like, money is a tool, not an ends. Like, it doesn't make any sense as anything but a tool. It's there to communicate value from two unrelated objects. That's it. Labor and goods, period. What I would like to do is, we're talking about a little earlier, when you were talking about you didn't want people to fly to the countries like you did. Now, is that strictly from an air pollution perspective, or are you thinking that them as people are physically like causing harm inside of that, like, but by going over there? Because and before you answer, and I apologize, I kind of want to interject my thought on that, which is I mean, that's how we grow as individuals. We go out in our 20s and our 30s, whenever that bug
Mhm.
takes us, whenever we find that impulse to finally get up and move, we do that so we can bring it back to where we came from and make that a more dynamic, a more unique place. We go and we study in Greece, and we come back with that, and we open up a restaurant or a museum or a shop of some kind that takes what we learned and brings it home. That to me is us growing. So I'm curious about what where was that coming from with the don't do it unless you really like have an agenda, or if you just explain it a little more for me, because I'm curious.
Okay, as I said, I think I think the two strands of it. One are, it's the price of it. I've always thought
Oh yeah.
it's far too cheap. I just think that, for you know for a few £100 you can get on a plane and just in a few hours be on the other side of the world and then just land there. And I just think that's, I don't know. I think it's just something. I'm not against technology. This is what I'm saying. I don't mean that,
No,
but
no, 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 no.
I think the more the cases, I think, like I say, let alone the absolutely environmental destruction. I mean, this is what makes me laugh. All these people going like, "Well, I'm going to go to Costa Rica and I'm going to go and stay in an environmentally friendly camp," and it's like they get on a plane. It's like you don't know how. It's
Oh,
hilarious.
okay, okay.
It's got
The
all these people.
vacationers. Okay,
Exactly,
all
all
right,
these people
okay,
doing their, all these people taking their year out student, between their year out, and they're all doing, oh well, I'm going to go to India and discover myself, and they're all taking these
okay,
jumbo jets, and you think, well, you don't need to do that because
okay.
you don't need to go to India. Trust me, to find yourself. There's nothing inherently about India. It's just like everywhere
No,
else on this planet, man. I mean, I've been there, so
right.
and
Yeah.
that's one of the things. And I think the other thing that happens as well, and again, it's something I've just witnessed, and this is the other thing, because it becomes so easy, and then you get almost packaged things. And every time I've been to, for instance, South America, you weren't seeing, I don't know, people like yourselves going down to South America. Oh no, these would be people who are like, oh no, daddy, I must go to South America for a month, and they've got more money than sense. They go
Hmm.
down to places like Argentina, and they just I mean, I tell you an Argentinian perspective, and he used to really make Argentina. Every Argentine I used to know, so make them so angry was like people would come along, dead, let alone when it gets to South Africa. No, let's go to South Africa. I'll give you a more extreme version. When I was in
Yes.
South Africa, man, there's people now going across and they go on there and they do these shanty tours. So they get in the back of a bus, they'd be picked up at wherever their little hotel, driven to some little shanty black place, and they get to see some pictures of some nice little cute black African babies, and like feel they've done their bit, and then they're just shipped out.
Yeah.
And it's horrible, man. And these people go back home. They go to their, they go around. All it's about is them telling a list of how great they've been and how educated they are, and la 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 la.
Okay.
And then they feel they've got the right to tell everybody else about everything else. And you think, you hypocrites, because these people always come back as the biggest, like, oh well, man, and we should all eat broccoli. And you're like, you've just flown on a plane and done a round the world trip for 6 months, so you can come back and work at your daddy's corporate bank and preach to me about
Okay.
being some enlightened being. No, 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 no. That's what I'm saying. Whereas if it was just triple the price of it, or as it should be, make the airline prices as they should be. We're all paying so cheap because they're subsidising it all. It's all conned. If
Sure.
we're not paying the real price for shitloads of things in this life because they're all.
That's absolutely true.
And if we were all paying the real price, then nobody would be getting over on a plane to sit and fly to Disneyland for a weekend.
Well, certainly none of us.
Dude, I know people who go to New York for the weekend. What the fucking world are we living where people are flying over the other
Punch them in the face.
Dude, I mean, this is the point, and the stupid most thing about this is every city in the world now, they all look the same. There's nothing inherently special about New York compared to London, compared to Paris, compared to. They're all the same. They've all got the same Starbucks, the same McDonald's, the same fucking, Gap Apparel.
Woo. That's sad, but you're right. Uh, okay, so your objection is the tokenism that travel allows you to have. You're able to say, "Oh, I'm traveled and I have experience and I have lived the life of these people," and that sort of patronizing bullshit. So it's less any sort of genuine searching or like living and actually taking anything, and just the leveraging of I've touched this place, therefore it is in my soul, and then the inherent problem of the fact that it is being subsidized and it's destroying the earth and a myriad of other complications that come with world travel. Okay, okay, yeah, I was taking on a much more conceptual level. You were very much in the in the know on that one. Frankly, you had seen it, you would have lived it. That was ignorance on my end. Uh,
Well, yeah, man. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, I'm saying this, and this is what makes me a very kind of a duality of a human being, because I live on a rock, surrounded by a sea, so I have to get virtually on a plane or a boat to leave this place. But every American, the amount of Americans I talk to, I think you could literally walk to Argentina. I've met people who have literally gone from literally from Russia across the Bering Straits on a motorbike and motorcycled it all the way down to Argentina, down to the very bottom, down to the very bottom. And you think,
yeah.
You don't need a plane for that, and it should. And the whole point of the adventure of it, if you've got the time and the ability to take that in your life, man, the whole fun of it. Now, this is the real solid. The whole experience of traveling isn't. Nobody remembers the plane journey. I don't remember I couldn't. No, exactly. But if it was, everybody remembers the bus journey, the car journey, the walking, the seeing. That's what people remember, man. So if you really want to go and travel around South America, why would you just think, I'm going to get in a plane? When you think, okay, half the fun about getting in would be maybe, getting a car, a bus. How would a Mexican get up to America? How would a Peruvian get up? He's not going to get a jumbo jet and land at LA airport. We can't. But people can get around. This is one of the things. Again, what I'm saying. We live in this world where everybody thinks that everything should be so easy and it should be there and instantly for them. And I'm sorry, that's the mindset we've got to change. We've got to realize that one of the things that I think separates us from an animal is that we understand deferment. And this is what I'm saying. We live in a culture, particularly in your part of the world, my part of the world, where we're never told to defer. Everything's about instant gratification. That's why credit cards, that's why debt, that's why we allow governments to go through debt, because nobody wants to say, maybe I should just defer a bit now, work a bit, and then get my rewards later on. So if I want to go to South America, maybe I'm going to have to really plan this out, rather than thinking, I should do it this weekend. I've got a credit card. Go and do it, because it doesn't. That whole plan, that narrative, doesn't do anyone any good. And all that happens is more planes happen, more people get in planes, more petrol chucked into the air. The plane industry has become really big. I mean, that's what I'm saying. And again, and you add into all that the fact it's all regulated and centralized, and then we can't have any innovation. It's like, where are the new forms of transport? This is what I'm saying. This is what I want, and I think so much of what we've got is all designed to make things easy and cheap and quick. Then it slows down progress.
It's too easy. Yeah, no, I completely and totally get what you're saying. We haven't made planes or boats, the large transport ones, any more efficient. They work, and so we're just like, fuck it, that's good enough. And so we've spent the last 70, 80, 90 years just kind of floating from point to point, oblivious, because it's fast and it's easy, and going back, we're lazy. We don't want to fix it. It works for us. We didn't. That sounds hard. Can you imagine how much work it would take to make a solar-powered freaking airline plane? That sounds insane. Why would we do that? Petrol works just fine. We've got it. It's just easy. It's fine. Let's just do that. No. I totally get that. Yeah.
Plus, as well, man. Let's be bottom line about it. I mean, I got no problem about people going and living with people, and that's something I've done. But tell you what, I've written about this many years and many long rants on paper about this. The last thing we need in this world is more tourists. This world, the less tourists we have, because this is again the duality. I mean, that's why I said to you the example about South Africa. People will never forget that. They come back with their phone. I'm like, amount of people. I went to the university, and the amount of these all they were capable of these phones. I'm like, they didn't even, they couldn't even comprehend for a moment the empathy about what it was like to be that person when your village every day you've got another tourist coming through and another one and another one. They couldn't sort of see it. They just sort of, they just sort of thought that it was, oh, it only happened for me. And then, I was so special. I'm like, no, this shit goes on. You think you're special, and then the next day, and then there's another one the next hour. Then this is the problem, man. And then you got to think, these are human beings. None of us are zoo. We're all sovereign beings, and that's what I hate about tourists. That's why I hate tourist places. I hate tourist towns. It's one of the things that's what I love about Scotland. It's one of the most beautiful parts in the world. But every Scot you meet will go, no, it's wet, miserable, and full of midges and flies. Stay away. It's beautiful, man. That's the best way of doing it. And that's what. But it's true, man. Because honestly, it's true. I mean, like I said earlier on, there's a bay at the end of the end of my street, and if I was anywhere, if I was in Italy or Spain, it would have speedboats, it would have apartments everywhere. It would be, because it's absolutely glorious. But because they've just kept that simple, no, we're miserable, stay away, it's wet, it's cold and horrible, it keeps the beauty alive, man. And I think there's something that's what my concept and my thought process about planes. I think tourism ruins places, and it's not needed.
Yeah, no, I feel like, and this may be my personal interpretation of the word, there's something empty about touring something. Like, you're not getting into it, you're simply observing it. It's a surface act. Like, I don't like going on vacations. I don't like going someplace and visiting them for 2 or 3 days. It feels disingenuous. I don't learn anything. Like, I don't feel like I've engaged anything at all. It feels like I've literally just wasted time that I could have done doing anything else. My idea of touring someplace is 6 months, 3 minimum, sitting there, getting up every day, walking and doing the exact same thing over and over again, getting a taste for what it is like. This is what life is in this 1 block radius, or 2 or 3, or whatever you can manage to familiarize yourself with. And I do think that there is a power to that, because I mean, I consider myself a very empathetic human being, and there is no way in hell I can imagine what it's like to live in that place simply by walking by at one time and going, this is pretty. Like, it just doesn't work. There's nothing there other than spectacle, and it's cheap and it's tawdry, and it doesn't breed respect. It breeds what's next, because it's like fireworks. Like, that was good, but was it as good as last year? No, last year's was better. Or no, it was better this year. Will next year be better? It doesn't have any longevity to it. It's just okay, and then we move on, and it's sad, and it's melancholy in the wrong way that the Scots are about their homeland. It's embracive, as opposed to trying to kind of push the world away. It's trying to hug everything to death, in this sort of vainglorious attempt to, I don't know. Honestly, I've never understood vacations, so I don't really know why they exist. I know I go on them periodically because it's demanded of me, but they're like 200 miles away, so it doesn't really count. Yeah, no, it never occurred to me that I agreed with you about that quite as intensely as as it kind of connected through by asking you the question. So I'm very grateful for this conversation, because I'd always felt that, but I was always kind of under the impression that I was an asshole for thinking that way. So I mean, it might still be true, but now I know that I'm not alone at the very least, and that there are more reasonable and thought out and humanitarian ways that I can justify that, in that it is inherently tawdry and fleeting.
Yeah, I mean, again, 2 points, man. I mean, you're right. There's now 2 of us on that beach. Hey,
Yay!
but again, I can only give you the perspective, man. And I try to always think. I try to see. Let's go to the duality. Like I said, when I lived in Venezuela, we lived on a beach down there, and I actually lived down there for 2 years. And once every year, February, it's the week of the dead. There's Semana Santa, as they call it, and then all the people from the crackers would all pour in. So this isn't tourists from an outside, country and stuff like that. But the locals, they in a duality, they hated it because they'd all these people just come down from the city in their 4x4s, come down there. Usually these pot-bellied men, because there's, that's what Venezuela's like. These
Right,
pot
sure.
pot-bellied men usually bringing 4 or 5, cool girls down with them down to the beach end for the weekend to get there completely, pissed out their brains and just do, all that, and then they'd be chucking bottles in the beaches because they're going to walk away. They don't care. They're
Yeah,
leaving
no,
this place.
yeah.
That's the point. So when you get these people they can't, the locals, they really didn't like it. But hey, this is what I always said, and it's one of the unspoken truths about this world, my man. It's, whether you want to call it karma or not, but as much as they disliked it, I saw this pattern over and again. It happened to me when I first landed there, and you'll probably notice a lot of people when they go to beaches, you'll be approached by a local when you go to a beach, and they'll come up to you and they give you some sort of patter like, do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy that? Whether it's, could be anything from a bead through to drugs or whatever they're doing a patter on you.
Yeah.
Now, if you it's like anything. How you approach that very initial situation whenever you meet a local will determine how you're going to be treated for the time you're there. Because if they see you're a fool and you're a mug, they're going to get all the money out of you, and you'll be walking away with loads of bracelets. If you're an absolute prick to them, like these tourists when we came to the beach, man, they'd be like, oh fuck, they call them all paupers and all this. Man, it was the old thing. They were robbed blind. Robbed blind, dude. They didn't leave that beach with nothing. I mean, literally, the hubs on their car were gone. And that's what I'm saying, because this is what people forget. This is what I hate about that whole kind of tourism concept, and just generally about. This is what I don't like about cities. It's why, as I get older, I don't like festivals. I don't like going to massive groups of people, because I think humans in massive numbers become this other thing, and they just become destructive, cruel. People in groups become. It brings out the best in people, because I've seen groups of people stood by and I've been to concerts and I've watched, groups of people stand in a circle and just pick up someone when they've fallen. So I'm not saying all crowds are bad, but generally you go to like a music festival, it's just trash everywhere. It brings out the worst. And I think, do we need all this? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Why do we need this whole idea of, collectively meeting 150,000? How weird is that? We didn't do that 100 years ago. We didn't have ideas of having weekend festivals.
We did. We called it war.
Exactly. But at least with war, man. I mean, ironically enough, even back then, at least the battlefield would have been left probably more clean than it is after a festival, because people went around and picked all the bodies and the trinkets and everything like that. This is what I'm saying. So you could even argue back then when we were savages, we were probably more clean and civilized than we are with some of these festivals now.
Oh, absolutely. And we didn't have plastics then either, which was a bit of a boon.
Exactly, and I just think, man, that's what I'm saying. I mean, about delving into too much into tourism, but I think it's a general sort of theme of this whole conversation. I just think this is why I'm generally in that more optimistic, as you would say, frame of mind, because I just think that more technology comes, more things like these plastics, these food, knowledge, all these things just adds. The way I look at it, Jacob, if we're here when your daughter's my age, she'll live in a far better world than we can imagine. If we're here, I mean, whether we're hit by an asteroid or whether we all kill ourselves, like you say, there's many negative traits we could go down. But if we do get to it, if we manage to, for whatever, by hook or by crook, get to 50 years down the line, man, I generally think if we're living in that world, then we're being a far more. These arguments will seem ridiculous, just like people 100 years ago talking about the idea of, do we separate people by color on a bus? I just think that some ideas that I just think are out of time, and I think that many of the ideas that are espoused right now are out of time, and I think the kids coming through right now, honestly, mate, I look at it all the time. Someone in their 20s, I'm an old granddad. Let alone what I'm like to a kid, and I'm only in my 40s. And trouble is, I think like a 10-year-old. I still haven't left school.
Right. Yeah. Every kid goes through the same. I mean, I tend to view not necessarily history, but certainly human development as a sort of circuitous thing. We all kind of go through the same things. We all become very like in that search for identity. We do say the wrong things. We do the wrong things, and part of us knows they're wrong, but we do them simply to try them on. The same way a 2-year-old says no. Like it's a second thing. And so I see that part of it a lot in my work at the library because I deal with the 12 to 14-year-olds who are going through that second toddlerhood. So I'm seeing the people who are, I mean, on the face of them, they're basically all psychopaths. They have no empathy. They're all really like, they're racist sometimes genuinely because people are, and other times just because they think it's funny. And so I think that may flavor the way that I see this, whereas you're looking at more of a, it gets better. I'm looking at it and I'm seeing it, and I'm terrified that what if this is permanent without having the ability to appreciate the fact that it's all been done. And the more I think about it, the more I try to distance myself from my own biases. I think you're right. I think that there is the old ways are dying, and the new ways will have their own problems, but that'll be at the end of their life, and there'll be something new to replace them. And provided no one pulls any overly large triggers before we get to the end of every single step, it will just kind of renew itself, and we may not exist in such large numbers. We may not exist in a way that we would deem desirable now. We will probably still be here. Even if the world, like if global warming happens and we lose at like so much of everything from you know the ocean life to land life, like there's we have the technology to grow this, grow that, grow the other thing, to subsist even alone on this planet. And that's terrifying and horrifying, and I don't want it to happen, but we could. And I think that at the heart of it, barring all the depressive stuff, there is that will that no matter what happens, we want to survive. We want to move forward. And there is that as you mentioned, the speed issue where, I mean, God, 200 less 150 years ago, we went from like, my dad had been mining the same like, or my dad had been planting crops for the same crops for 300 years. And in one lifetime, someone could grow up from seeing the first steam engine to watching a man walk on the moon. One lifetime. And I think that really, thinking of that really hammers home that positivity of your worldview, because it is. I mean, just to imagine that, to imagine something changing that drastically, to go from 150,000 years of agriculture to, yeah, we just landed on that thing we've stared up at and wondered about forever. So neat. I can't hear you. This is a problem.
Sorry, man. I was just saying
Oh.
the other thing to bear in mind about all that as well is that not only have we made that much leaps in a short period of time, but as I was kind of go back to before, we haven't changed that much as a species, man. We're not,
No.
you know what I mean? That's one of the things that we always got to, you know, maybe give ourselves a bit of a break. And again, I this is a perfect example of what maybe why I tend to look at things on the way I do. I mean, I look at it and go, okay, so let's take this guy to the Trump one. Okay, so if it's some dystopic fascist nightmare, I'm thinking great. So that means for the next 5 years, then we're going to get some of the great best films out. Musicians are going to come out. There's going to be a great new whole rebellion. But man, as I go back before, my worry is that they're all sitting there cheering the CIA and stuff, and so I'm hoping that we do get some of this thing. And one of the
Right.
again,
Proper fear.
exactly. One of the again, I thought it was just it was one of the beautiful ironic things about, you know, how I think. I mean, you know how I feel about George Orwell, and how many, and I think we spoke about it last time, how few people read George Orwell, how it's been treated over here. And I was just reading just last week that since the presidential election over your part of the world, man, the amount of people going out and buying 1984 has just gone. And I thought,
They had to send it back for reprinting. That's insane. Now we decide to read a book. Now we decide to read a book. Finally.
Exactly, but isn't that that's a win to me, man. That's what I mean. I'm
No,
optimistic.
absolutely.
Even out of the shit can come greatness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Spanish Armada, except orange flavored, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, no, absolutely. And there is, I mean, historically, I believe that that's absolutely true. In the worst events, we find the greatest human achievement, from the Cold War and that constantly being on the cusp, to going to the moon, to entering that glorious space race, from the Spanish Armada and getting Shakespeare and Milton and all of that, to, oh God, what was the other one? Christ, I had this. There were other ones in time, and if my brain were working better, I would bring them up now. So pretend I said them and not accordingly. Uh,
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. You know, we are on a general. That's what I'm saying. That's why I tend to look at it, because I think that it's boil this right down to the bottom line, man. I mean, yes, there are some parts of this the human species, and there's part of the humanity itself that's got some very negative traits about it. But I don't know. I think if I mean we debatable what the percentage is, but you know, a large percentage of human beings on this planet aren't like that. You know, they might different
right.
ideas and opinions and about how things should be sorted and organized,
Mm-hmm.
blah 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 blah. But they, you know, as I've always said, a very large percentage of the people, if they saw someone hit by a car on the road, would go over and help them. And that you
Yeah.
know what I mean. And what we're talking about, the whole of this conversation, is that it is truly the outliers. Those parts, people who almost got, you can get into very, this is again, I think maybe we will progress, go right back to the beginning of this conversation with psychedelics, which I think will happen in the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And that
Mm-hmm.
that will open up people completely, because we can start to look into, why are these people wired like that? Is it something that is genetic? Is this upbringing? Or maybe it's a combination of both, all these things. But we can fix human beings, because there's very, very few people, even, you know, whatever side they may be, whatever, you know, the guy who's screaming Allah Akbar in the middle of a, you know, Paris, you know, art gallery, right through to the guy who's like, I don't like, I want to go back to good old America. All they want to do is they want to look after their own. They hopefully want to, you know, progress into the next few years. You know, that's, even those people, they're not motivated by actual going out and actually physically killing and harming human beings. They just want to be left alone to their own culture. There's very few people in this world who actually get off on actual
Yes.
physical harming of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is what I'm always optimistic on, because the rest of it is ideas. Great, so we can dilute ideas, because all ideas are is us as a species, as human beings, going, oh shit, I don't know what's going on, let's all try to find some solutions and some answers, and we're all just trying to get along in this big confusion. That's great, I don't mind that. But when that starts getting shut down, like I was saying at the beginning of this conversation, that's the danger, because we can only ever evolve when ideas are allowed to have, you know, when we're allowed to have the idea of expressing thoughts and ideas, when ideas can be put on the seat of a reason and challenged and thought, and we can express these things, and that needs to happen. And that's why I think,
Absolutely.
as I said before, that's what technology right now offers. It does offer those ability to have these kind of conversations. You know what I mean? Where they can go out into the public domain, whereas they didn't have that. We didn't have this ability 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's to me is why I'm always on a general more a positive one, because I think, and I think it always goes back to, and this is a call I had to many creative people, is this is the responsibility is always falling out on the shoulders of creative people. It's what we do with it. We can't just sit back and go, well, the world's shit. There's no, okay, great. If you think the world's crap, then write the book, then draw the painting, do something that's going to shift just one person, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Add some beauty in this world of doom. Do something, but that's what we creative can do. But equally, we can creative. That's what I'm saying. As I've said before, I mean, what came first, NASA or the science fiction writer? What came first, you know, the architect or the artist? I mean, the creative people are always the ones that can do things, and that's why we have so much power. But creative people never realize it, because we just want to sit in our little rooms and be miserable, right, and not want to shine out into the world. And that's, to me, is something that we've got to learn to do, man. We've got to kind of realize that we are in a for want of a better word, we're in a culture war. And if we want to have the world that we want for your daughter and my son, then it's going to have to take people to stand up and do this. And I always think it's lazy for people in my world, part of the world, and your part of the world, especially your creators, to go, oh, I don't want to do that because I'm upset what people think. I think, like you said, suddenly you've got to go back to your grandfather, and they're facing bullets in World War One, when my grandfather was. So what excuse have we got, man? There's people right now who they're sleeping in places where literally bullets are flying over their head, and there's a 10-mile walk for water tomorrow morning. What excuse have we got as creative people, man? Sometimes we can really sound like first world problems and first world ideas.
Oh, absolutely.
And really, that's why I always say, the people I've known and I've met in my life who haven't given the opportunity, haven't got the ability to sit up and have a nice, pleasant conversation because they've got the internet connections and they've got a roof over their head, those people would do anything to be in our position, and they would be doing so much, and they'll be doing so much more. That's why I'm always optimistic, and it's my incentive every day of my life to do stuff, because I think my optimism isn't maybe coming from what I hear in the media, but I'm thinking, damn, well, I know there's kids all over Africa, Malaysia, all over the world, that one of them kids is going to change everything. And that, to me, is why we need to keep the communication things open completely, because once you shut down communication, that's all lost.
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. It's no, I'm not even sure what to add to that. You're absolutely right that there's a necessity of connecting. We have to give people more access to each other, not less. And there is this concern now. There's this big concern over the right and the left, and them excluding each other from their online communities because they want to live in the echo chamber, and that is, as you pointed out, a very, very grave concern, because it creates a false binary that there is no middle ground. You pass the litmus test or you don't, and that's just the way of life, which is just nonsense. And I feel like the more people we have in there, the more chances there are for people to break that mold, because as you pointed out before, all it takes is one. All it takes is one person to create this new paradigm to re-engage politics, to put things on a perspective of, okay, well, let's not talk about everything all at once. Let's talk about this specific topic right here. How do we regard on that? And then you find, oh, okay, well, I'm on this side and this side and this one and that one. And then next topic over, you're on the other end, and suddenly we're engaging in much more rational discourse. And it's like, no. It'll still be full of trolls, but it would be much more, well, human, because it'd have layers to it. We would be being honest with each other as opposed to reactionary, and that is where the world ends up going, because we need it. And frankly, I believe that we deserve it as a species. Like we are pretty freaking cool, like, as a species. Like, just the fact that we can do this, that someone made this possible, is mind-blowing to me, and it never ceases to make me grateful for being alive when I am. No matter how depressed, no matter how angsty I get, I am always, always, always grateful to be able to get on the internet and talk to people halfway around the world anytime. I could log onto a chat room right now and meet someone that I would literally have never even been able to dream about 50 years ago. And that is insane and beautiful and wonderful, and I takes us next.
Well, yeah, dude, I personally think, and to get sort of kind of quite metaphysical on this sort of stuff, but I personally think the very concept that we can disagree with each other is one of the greatest things about us as human beings, and I think it's great. That's what I'm saying. Bring on the disagreements, bring on that, because I'm saying all the time. This is why I've always thought this, that all the time that human beings are doing this and they're discussing things, it's not human beings on the warfield and putting bullets into each other. Yep. And that is the bottom line. That's a win. This is why I always sort of say, that's why I'm, like I said before, 100 years ago, guys, again, I'm speaking my part of the world, but a whole generation of men were just lost, sent out to defend yards of territory, and just walk into walls of machine gun bullets. That was as I said before, we have definitely progressed as a civilization where that you couldn't get that anymore.
No.
For that to happen now, they'd have to, as I said before, a government would have to send robots out. And I said
Yep.
before, this is again, bring it on, because this is a great thing with being again. All the negative, the most doomtastic things, I can always almost kind of always see that positive spin. And I think, great, okay. So someone says to me, oh yeah, you're right. There's going to be no more human war conflict. But what they do is they're just going to build an army, a big army of robots, and then it's going to go in and control nations. And I said, do you know what? Bring that on, because the first government that puts out an army of drones, then it's all humanity versus those drones, and that's going to be the greatest unifying thing we've ever had, man.
It's basically aliens except robots. It creates the same. It creates a proper other, not by culture, not by religion. It creates a proper other for us to unite around. Like this is wrong. This is what we'll conquer, and with any luck at all, that would prove binding for at least a generation. And that you're absolutely right. That would be, I mean, best case scenario, that would be just sublime. That would be exactly what we would need in order to have like a golden age. Is some asshole being dumb enough to be like, let's just let robots do it. And there's a very good opportunity that may be what happens. And I look forward to killing them all and then finally writing the great American novel. I really look forward to that. Finally.
Yeah, man. I think the thing as well, man. Again, if we're going to have this whole, which has been again the theme of this whole conversation, if it have anything based in just reason, and rather than just superficial ideas and beliefs and stuff, it's undeniable that we're a much better place than we were 100 years ago. Far less humans are being killed. We're living longer. Our health, even the worst person on this planet right now is better off than probably the best person 100 years ago. Do you know what I mean? We're in a far better, and that is generally the progression. It's only a case of how much you want to step out of your little, like you say, your little echo chamber, and maybe the real stepping out of echo chamber is go, right, let's step right back and look at us as a species and go, oh, actually, we are getting along. Do you know what I mean? And again, for all our angst, for all our divisions, for all our hatred, as I said, man.
Yep.
Hey, I'm in my mid-40s, and they still haven't dropped that nuclear bomb yet. So there must be some sort of good thing about that and hey, dude, I remember thinking in the 90s, oh god, man, with here comes Yeltsin, drink, glug glug glug, but we made it through, man. We made it through by hook or by crook. We made it through, man. That's what I'm generally optimistic for, man. I just think that if we've got this far, and we can make it through the 90s when we didn't have we didn't have phones, and we were all reliant on 6 TV channels and a couple of mad presidents and all this sort of stuff. We were drunks. We can make it through, man. We're in a different world, because that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter even what we're saying about the media. No government, no one really can hide this shit anymore. I mean, if 80 people, that's what's great. 80 girls are kidnapped in Nigeria. That doesn't just get washed under the carpet. Everybody knows about the girls. I mean, okay, in time they get forgotten about. But what I mean? That awareness of us all just means they can't get away with so much shit, because people are just like, well, wait a minute. And that's what I'm saying, the intermingling. Dude, I really want to kind of wrap this up, man, because I'm heading towards 4 o'clock in the morning, man. It's been a proper.
Jeez, no, absolutely.
But one of the things, there is a couple of things. One of the things I'm going to, unusually for someone who isn't a musician, I'm going to play out with a piece of music. Now, I told you this before, and I don't think I don't know whether you got around to listen to it, but I started doing some Tundra. A project called Tundra.
I remember you sent me that. It was good.
Exactly. So I'm going to play that tonight, because that was from our last conversation, and I think it kind of plays in really well what we're talking tonight, man. And that was called Adrift Amongst the Corpses. So that was I'm going to play out that. So man, while I'm queuing that up, again, please tell people who may be listening where they can reach out, where they can find, where they can reach out and find you. And secondly, just in while I'm queuing up in a short little paragraph, what would be your parting message for anybody listening to this conversation?
Starting with the first part, I can be reached at rumandwriting.com. That's my little blog thing. It's got book reviews and personal writings and things like that. I can be found there. Comments are always welcome. even if you're telling me that I suck, because I mean, sometimes it's important. You need to grow as a person, and otherwise, I I suppose when it comes down to the whole of humanity, it's everything we've talked about tonight, and it is the very nature of your show. Life is people, and isn't that just the greatest damn thing in the world?
Perfect. Well, as Jacob, as always, it's been an absolute insightful conversation. I want to thank you for your time.
Yours as well.
And you know what I'm saying. And we're going to play out with Adrift Amongst the Corpses, which features the very erudite words of tonight's guest, Jacob. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure from me over here in Scotland to all there in good old USA, good old America. I'm going to say life is people, people, and this is Adrift Amongst Corpses. It is coming. This is why this show is live.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That way we can catch all of the stuff. It's important.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know. The person I was thinking of is like 35 this year, but they don't use the internet. They don't have any connection, so they're really an outlier. Certainly, no one with a cell phone with mobile data they can't be free from the information that is available just because they're not willing to ask themselves the question. God, that's tricky because everyone is independently exclusive in the way that they view and engage the world. So some people are going to confront those questions because they don't engage the technology. The person I'm thinking of, I didn't realize that sound was bad for them and doesn't consider those like anything we were talking about today. They just don't care. They're more concerned with what immediately consumes it, whether it be their job or their own art or whatever it is that they're doing to distract themselves in between labor and health. They distract themselves, and I can't blame them for it necessarily because they're not engaged in the technology that's causing a lot of the issues. But I don't think they can be let off the hook either, like as a rule. But I mean, you can't indict someone for not being aware of something like that's what do you do with that? I mean, you have to change the system, but you can't depend on the system to convey any real information. You know what I mean? Like if we're saying that the system not telling them, if they can't be blamed for the system not telling them, then we can't, blame the system for telling them either. And so it works both ways. And so where are they supposed to find this information? They have to reawaken enough to ask that question. And how do you necessitate that? How do you get them to question everything that they do? How do you awaken that curiosity in someone? And again, I think that the ultimate, either it's a better public education or it's no public education. I can't quite tell which. Like, I think that they need to be like a guarantee that any 2 or 3-year-old that asks the exact same questions given enough airtime and like tenacity. But a 7 or 8-year-old who's been through the ringer a couple of times from parents who, I mean, we teach our kids to talk, and then as soon as they start talking, we tell them to shut the hell up. Like, how is it supposed to survive in that system? You can't. You're told not to tell stories. You're told not to do this and that thing. No one's telling you what to do, just what not to do. You're utterly powerless. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I was there's an entire data complex, the government and the corporations that for lack of a better word, rule the government that are saying, don't show them this, show them that, don't show them this, don't show them that, but do show them this. And so there's a myriad of things that are being deliberately hidden from people. And I think, and again, I'm not saying they are devoid of any responsibility, but if you don't know there's an earthquake in Hong Kong, how can you feel bad about it? Like, obviously, if you were to search Hong Kong, or if you were to do other things, you could find it, but they're being fed things that feed into their worldview. Right now, Facebook is feeding you things that they know that you want to hear. If you go into your advertising, you can see what they have you putting as a moderate, a liberal, or conservative. You can figure out exactly what they're playing towards. And that's the way all of it works. They show you things that they want to show you, and as long as the government and corporations are feeding you what you want to know, they're going to immediately feed that bias within yourself. And I think that's, and again, that goes we talked about is the fact that I'm basically blaming the bigger entities for our negligence. Because, I mean, I believe that they have a responsibility to us to not try, and I obviously they are. Like, there's that's some liberal bullshit on my end saying that, well, they shouldn't do that. Well, they are fucking doing this. What are you going to do about it? Whatever, shut up. But it's, I can't blame people for being stupid. I blame the system that let them be stupid. And that is changing. I will acknowledge that if my daughter ends up stupid and vapid, that's either on me or on her, not some governmental entity, not some corporate entity, because, like, there's too much of it too young. Like, because kids are curious beyond rational bounds. They're going to ask every stupid fucking question they have, and with the whole people that have the word Sherman and tits and dicks sometimes, but they will find the answers. That's beautiful. It'll be fucked up and lead to some strange conversations at Thanksgiving, but I had those anyway, so I don't see a problem with it. But right now, with the people we have in this infrastructure, they're not necessarily growing up with it. They're just kind of feebly pushing against the edges and seeing what can get them what they want. And while they're still feeding that piece of themselves that is the id, the super ego is basically left to rot. Because they're constantly finding new things to jack off to, new things to do this and everything. Like, they're finding all of these distractions. Like, sure, there may have been 200 people brutally murdered in a village outside of, like, oh God, what was it? Whatever sure African country is being destroyed by rebels. God. But this police officer stopped in front of, like, the Michigan highway and let ducks cross the street. That was a feel-good moment. Can we all agree that was pretty awesome? Go back to work. It's okay. You had your break. I don't know. It's tricky for me. I don't have a right answer. I know there's not a right answer, but I want it to be that, you know, we're transforming. We're becoming something better. But right now it's ugly, it's imperfect, and it's really fucking lazy because no one's had to fight for information like this before. Like, no one's had to find the right words or the right questions to ask. Everyone's been able to just read enough or partake enough passively in the world they existed, and they sort of stumbled upon it, you know what I mean? Like, when you read the newspapers back in, like, Napoleonic times, or indeed pre-World War II times, before there was the propaganda department, you could find these editorials that were legitimately delving into the issues as they were, and that's not the case anymore. Journalism is dead, news is dead, everything is dead, and so we're basically adrift among corpses, and so we don't have anything true to hold on to. And I think in 10, 15, 20, 30 years that will change. But right now, fuck, no one has a goddamn chance. It's when the world comes back into, oh, absolutely, it's never out of our hand. I don't mean to say that we're completely totally removed from responsibility. I don't know. I don't know. You want it to mean something. You want it to stand as some sort of piece of the human condition. You want to write your demons.
Life is people.